So today we are here with Sebastian Juncadella.
Thank you for
So
having me.
absolutely, thanks for coming.
Appreciate it. No, this is fun. I understand episode one, huh?
Episode one. Yeah, you're the founding guest.
That's awesome. All right. Hopefully it just gets better and better from here for sure.
We have a good lineup, and you're part of it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So I brought you on because we are talking to figures in the commercial real estate community in Miami or greater Miami to just talk about their experiences, what it's like to take on the career, how it's been, what you see in the market today, and really a whole bunch of other stuff. But I just kind of wanted to start off maybe asking you a little bit about your personal life because when you're a broker, sometimes they kind of mold into the two, especially you, right? Because you work with your family,
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
that's definitely an interesting dynamic.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, and I appreciate it, and I think today is going to be interesting because we're going to be talking about me. But first, I'm going to tell you, like, definitely, I've been following you now on Instagram for a while, and we've had a meeting. So props to everything you've been doing. This is really exciting to see you developing this content and everything. I
Thank
know
you.
that I'm a big fan of that. So before we spend the next, 20, 30 minutes talking about me, I just wanted to tell you, great job with what you're doing, and appreciate you having me on. This is going to be a lot of fun. So, yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I think, what we had discussed was, just talking a little bit about how I got into the business at first. I come from a real estate family, and what I think is really interesting is real estate families, generally speaking, a lot of people seem to gravitate towards, what their family does, and real estate is a great example of that. My father and my mother were both immigrants to this country. They came in to the United States for college. One left as a refugee of Cuba, and one left as a refugee of Nicaragua, and kind of the political environments there. And so when they came to this country, they got their college degrees and they went into sales because sales is a great opportunity. I can't think of a better line of business to get into from the perspective of American Dream. A lot of upside and the ability to really showcase your talents and try to get things done. So my father started as a realtor at I think at Kai's or Keller Williams or one of those as a
Wow.
just selling apartments to his friends that were moving to the United States. And then he got into industrial, and then it kind of just took off from there. And he's been an industrial broker for 35 years, and yeah, I'll tell you that for me, I always did think there was a possibility that I would get into real estate because, being a kid, I saw my father's relationship with his work and his career, and it was always really positive, right?
Hmm.
I saw my father as a very present figure. He was always there after 5 p.m. He was always there picking me up from school. He could take the day off if we wanted to go to Disney World. I saw him. Number two, he really loved what he did. When he would invite us to the office, you could tell that there was excitement and there was, joy in what he was doing. And then finally, candidly, I saw that it was lucrative. We all lived in a smaller house, and as his career took off, we started, growing the house, and we got a house and the keys. And then you see that as a kid, and you're saying, hey, I hear a lot of people kind of talk about how work's a drag and everything, but when you see your own father really enjoy it, and you see the results of it, I think for me it was always in the back of my head, like, hey, this is something maybe I will get into it because obviously it's worked for my father, who I love and respect tremendously. So that's kind of what planted the seed in my head, and then kind of later on, there's a whole different story, but that's where I kind of thought, hey, I could get into real estate.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Real estate is a tough field, and they say that commercial real estate is maybe even tougher in some regards. And that's really excellent that, your father found that path. And the fact that you decided to take that path too, I think it's an amazing path. And I know you've done very well for yourself. We met, I believe, when you were speaking at a NIA event many months ago. And I just said, this guy is speaking really well, and he's done very well for himself in this field. And I wanted to get to know him. So I think I met you maybe by the elevator or something like
Yeah,
that. I
yeah, I
just
think
struck
I
up a
remember that.
conversation, and now we know each other a little better. So it's great.
For sure.
So and you decided to stick into industrial real estate as well.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, when I went to school, there's a period of time I didn't think I was going to get into real estate. I wanted to be, I studied finance in college, and I thought I was going to get into investment banking. But I went and was a randomly. This is pretty random, but
Yeah.
I was a high school teacher after college. I did a year of
Really?
volunteering. Yeah,
Awesome.
I taught over in Micronesia. I taught English, so
Wow.
that was a very very formative experience. Living below the poverty line for 12 months,
Wow.
and when I came back, I was like, all right, my job offers kind of dried up because I was gone, and so I said, I'm going to come back to Miami. I'll reapply and I'll go back to work in New York. And so my father very smartly was like, hey, why don't you just work in the family business for the summer as you get your feet underneath you? And so I gave it a try, and it was just one of those things that it was just the right fit. And then also my mentor, and we've talked about this, my mentor being my father, like I have a lot of friends that have worked with their families and it doesn't work out a lot of the times. I would say it's almost probably 50-50 in regards to if you can work with your family. But I was fortunate that, both my father and my mother in the business, have a great relationship with them and also have a great working relationship. A lot of respect for what I would say a lot of respect for what they give me as experience and advice, but also they give a lot of respect to kind of my newer creative ideas in some cases. And it just, we started seeing the results right away. And most importantly, we were all really happy working with each other. So, yeah, that's where I got into it. And then we started focusing a lot on industrial, which is, my bread and butter. And I just kind of like that line of business. And then, since then, I look up and it's been 12 years working in that field. So,
12 years.
yeah,
No
yeah,
way.
yeah.
So how was it in the beginning? They say that the first couple years are pretty hard, and then it gets easier and easier, and you start to kind of find your way. So how was it for you?
Yeah, I would say like the toughest part initially was for me like running out of stuff to do, like around 2 p.m. in the day, right? Like
Okay.
I didn't really have like a pipeline. I was helping my father with some deals, but we didn't really have like a super huge industrial portfolio to keep me busy. We would build that over time, but initially it was almost like, and I think we talk about this with a lot of like young brokers is you kind of do your deals, you take care of you put out the fires, and then sometimes you look up and you're like, how am I going to generate business today? And like,
Mm.
how do I take that next step? And I think the frustrating part for me in the first 2 years was, you know, I was, I wanted to keep working, I wanted to keep doing things, but it's almost like you figure out like, hey, how do I generate more leads? How do I fill my roster or how do I fill my pipeline with more transactions? And I think that was the toughest part, kind of figuring out what would be my source of business aside from just cold calling and reaching out randomly or knocking on doors. And that took a little bit of time getting used to because, as you know, it's a commission based business. First couple of years, I definitely was taking a pay hit as compared to maybe some of the jobs I could have gotten in New York. But I would say that it's one of those businesses that the growth can be exponential. It's not just
Yeah.
like 5% per year. It's like there is no ceiling. You start January 1st with no ceiling, and the floor is always zero, but you start with no ceiling. So I'd say that the toughest part initially was trying to keep myself super busy because that's kind of how I'm programmed. Just I want to be overwhelmingly busy, or else I feel like something's wrong.
So you thought about maybe going up to New York when you started out your career?
Yeah, I thought maybe that's where as an investment banker I thought that's where I may end up, but I kind of came back to Miami and being Miami born and raised, you have some people that are locals that are like, hey, I can't wait to get out. I never was one of those people. Like I always loved Miami and I saw all the value in it. And yeah, after I came back and I started working that summer in real estate, I was like, no, I'm happy here. Like this is great. I love it. It's too cold up there. And then also, just like the Miami, I love fishing. I love the outdoors down here. I love kind of just the flavor of Miami. And I just was like, I think pretty quickly I realized I'm here to stay.
Nice. That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, I think there's definitely been a change. Miami has grown a lot, and I actually grew up in New York, and I moved
Really?
down here. So I moved down here full time about 3 years ago. I finished my degree. I came down, and from an outside perspective, especially somebody who's seen a lot of different big cities, especially New York, I look at Miami and I see the potential it's got. And
For sure.
I've gotten opportunities to leave or to go to other cities, and I think there's so many things that this city has to offer that are better than
Yeah.
other cities. Like it's a little bit more scale, better scale. New York City is really a formidable city.
Yeah.
You feel like a little grain of sand
For sure.
often.
Yeah.
And I think that's the truth, especially if you're going to work in a finance or investment banking career. Like, in the beginning, oof, I mean, the fact of the matter is people don't care who the number year one is. You have to really work your way into it, and that's fine. But Miami's growing a lot. I think it has a lot of space to grow. I've had conversations with people of all different backgrounds of what their thoughts are on Miami, and certainly it's gotten harder for like your average renter when they're talking about like residential rents. So that's been difficult, especially for like people who have W-2 or 9 to 5 jobs, and maybe the salary doesn't really help them so much just get by so easily. So that's a difficult thing. I do hope that maybe Live Local and some other policies will kind of encourage sustainable policies, because I mean we need people of all different professions
A
in the
hundred
city.
percent.
You can't have just one or the other. um, I think that I'm bullish on Miami. I mean,
Yeah,
regardless, I think every city has its challenges. Just because Miami is expensive, I mean New York is still double,
for sure.
right? So it's got a lot to offer for sure. So Sebastian, you studied finance in college. Did you go to school in Miami?
Yeah, so I went to school down here. I went to Belen Jesuit,
Oh, great.
and then
Okay,
I graduated, and then yeah, I went up to Boston College, and actually I got two majors. I got one in finance, and then one in philosophy of all things.
interesting.
Yeah, so philosophy, I actually use that line of thinking a ton. I think it teaches philosophy. It teaches you to be empathetic with other trains of thought
Mm-hmm.
while not necessarily adopting them, right? So, like in a philosophy, like in my philosophy classes, I had to understand certain hyper pessimistic mindsets like Nietzsche and those type of philosophers, and
Yeah.
then hyper positive. But you have to be able to like understand that and then take what you want from it, but also not necessarily like fully adopt certain philosophical, I would say, ways of thinking. It works a lot in practical life, and it works a lot in business in the sense that if you can put yourself in the shoes of the other person and you kind of understand where people are coming from, it helps you communicate better, and communication is key, like to everything. So I don't know, that philosophy degree, if I ever go back to school, honestly, I don't think it'll be for like anything finance related. I think I'm going to go back and try to like maybe get a master's or a doctorate, a PhD in philosophy, because it was
Yeah.
that important to me.
Okay, so you heard it here. Sebastian is leaving the brokerage industry to become a PhD in
Full
philosophy,
time philosopher,
full
yeah.
time philosopher.
Hmm.
That's really funny. You went to BC. Actually, I went to Tufts. I
Oh,
finished my degree
cool.
up
Yeah,
there.
yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah.
up in Somerville, Medford area, and I came straight back down. I was in Fort Lauderdale for a year, moved summer actually. Came up to finish my degree. I did half of it online because I transferred there.
Hmm.
Oof, it was a mess going to school during the COVID times.
Man,
It was a
I'm not
very
jealous of
weird.
that, man. That's tough. I feel a lot of people were robbed of some like great years in those times, and it's unfortunate. It's just time you can't get back, but you got it done, which I think that's the toughest thing to do. Online classes. Thank God I didn't have
Yeah,
to do that. Like that's tough to have the discipline to sit through those.
it was wild. And actually, like you went to Micronesia for some time, I spent some time in Asia.
Oh,
So
cool.
I did like a gap experience for what turned out to be more than just a year. It became like 2.5 years because, the whole world changed while I
Yeah.
was out there. And I made the decision to stay out there for like a year longer as everything got shut down. And I was in Taiwan for
Wow.
2.5 years and did some bouncing around to China and Korea and so on. And it was one of the best experiences. I had my classmates come visit me once in Taipei, and I brought them to one of the temples in the middle of the city, and we had like an incense stick. And I showed
Really
them how my Taiwanese friends showed me what you do, as a
cool.
foreigner. And they looked at me and they said, wow, man, I think you learned more here than we did in school. And that stuck with me because they said that maybe 4 years ago. And I thought to myself, I was always, you know, maybe criticizing myself for taking off school. I could have gone the way like all of my friends are trying to go. They're gunning for the MIT or the Harvard.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
went to a really competitive high school where the parents and the students all wanted to get into Stanford or Harvard.
Damn.
It was a public school, but the culture was like very academic, and honestly, I think that's great. I think
Yeah.
it's great. Much better than some other things. And the fact of the matter is, not everyone can get in it. And also, there's other experiences in life that teach you so much. And travel, oh my God, travel is like the best.
100%.
So, like, if a young person in their 20s can afford it, or 18 to 25, 26, or older, Do
Totally
it.
agree. Yeah.
Go.
Yeah. Like gap year, like you mentioned, like, I applied to a program and I didn't think I was going to get in. I'm not an education major, but I was like, if I get in, I'm going to go. I'm going to take it as a
Nice.
sign. And yeah, it was a perfect time because, like, once you get into your own career, it's like, it's hard to get out. And then, like, say you get married and you have kids, like, you have to ride, once you get in that track, you have to stay in that track and see it through. But that year between college and starting a job, I tell everyone if you can find a program, either the Peace Corps, I did what's called World Teach, or you do something, Teach for America or something like that, or a gap year, like 100% do it because you're not going to get that time back, and you're always going to have the opportunity if you're driven to come back, find another job opportunity, and lean on that experience, like you said, the traveling experience and the learning from other cultures. So it's just going to benefit you. So I totally agree with that.
Yeah, so from Micronesia to Taiwan, there's really all these different experiences that can take you in and kind of change your mind. I think that there's an analogy that you can make to being like in a fishbowl, right? When you get taken out of your tank, you kind of become a different person. So it'll make you wiser. And shoot, I remember I was in Vietnam because my was like about to expire. I needed to like reset it. So I got a cheap ticket to Vietnam on like the most budget airline, and I got like a motorbike. I no license. I don't know. They just gave it to me. They said if you have $10,
You're
we'll
good.
accept it. Uh, Fill your tank. And I actually never learned how to ride a motorbike,
Oh
but
my
they didn't
God.
care. They just wanted me to give them the $10. So
That's so funny, man.
so I went on my first motorbike adventure in Hanoi for like it was like 2 hours up north, and I got lost, and it was really terrifying actually. And then my phone fell off the motorbike and crashed into a
Dude.
million pieces. So my GPS was gone, right? So like experiences like that, as horrifying as they might sound, they teach you that you're gonna survive. And as a matter of fact, I'm still here, in
That's
one
pretty cool,
piece.
man. Yeah.
It was wild, and I don't speak their language, right? So there's a lot of hand signals going
Yeah,
on and
yeah, yeah.
gestures, and um, some guy tried to bring me to his friend's backpackers hostel. I'm like, no, that's not the right one. You're scamming me. We tried to communicate in French. I don't speak French.
Yeah. That's so funny, man. Yeah, but like you said, that's like formative experiences. You learned to improvise, adapt, and overcome, right? So
Yeah, it made for
that's
some great application essays when I was flying
that's
back to
funny.
school. So
Good stuff.
absolutely. So that's awesome. So let's talk about the market a little bit. So you're an industrial specialist. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would
Okay,
say so.
great. So, what kind of buyers and people looking to lease are you seeing right now in the South Florida market? So, Tri
Yeah.
County.
So Miami, I would tell you, even from when I started, call it a decade ago, it was never like a tier one market for investment, but it has quickly become that. Like in the sense that if you're a big industrial fund, more and more times I'm getting the comment that, hey, we need to have a presence in Miami. We have to at least own something in Miami.
Wow,
And that's a great thing to hear, like you said, to the benefit of the city, because all of a sudden our real estate starts getting valued more and more, investment properties in regards to industrial, because of the fact that now on a national level, people have been paying attention to the rent growth and the macro factor, dynamics that are here. So I would say that the investor pool is extremely deep. Like we're selling a property right now. It's not a huge deal, but it is, big enough where some funds could go after it. And the amount of people that are interested in it, we've had, 50 non-disclosure agreements signed. I already know we're going to get over 10 offers, like on day one. And it's just, you see this depth of demand and you realize like, Miami has not gone unnoticed by the investment community, especially like the institutional grade investment community. And then we have all the macro factors that they love to put in their investment committee portfolio, like, hey, lack of land, growing population, the ports are doing well, the seaports are doing well. So, like, all that factors into the fact that, like, Miami industrial real estate is getting more and more expensive because it's just really hard to buy in this market and there's so much buyer demand.
that's fascinating. So, which areas are you seeing the most industrial spaces open up right now?
So there's a lot of development happening right now, but they're not really for sale, right? It's mostly, people have rushed to meet this demand of tenants, perhaps more so than ever in the regards to like the total industrial pipeline that's coming online. So we have a little bit of concern in regards to there's going to be a little bit of standing vacancy. Is it going to move the needle so dramatically that the prices are going to drop? I don't think so. I think that we're going to see that rental rates are going to kind of hold for a little bit. Prices have continued to go up, which have surprised me, but it's just because so little has traded. But a lot of development happening kind of in the northern parts of Miami, like northwest corner, we call it County Line. We've seen some really big developments are going to happen in Doral into the coming year. As well as some just north of Opa-locka and around Opa-locka Airport. So a lot going on up there. Kind of where there's less activity, which I think is interesting, is south of the 836, so the Dolphin. I saw a stat the other day, which I really like, is that 50% of the population lives south of the Dolphin Expressway, but only 8% of the industrial inventory is in that location. So like you're talking about, like there's very little warehouses to service that population, and I think as a result, Homestead and South Dade is going to become a relief valve. Like you were talking about it earlier, like Miami's getting really expensive. Like I see that as a super important part of our city because that's going to be where the growth, both residential, I think industrial, and also other commercial, is going to continue to go because we need it because we can't really go to Broward, can't go to Palm Beach. I mean, you can, but it is still pretty expensive. Homestead and the Redlands and that whole area down there, South Dade. It is, in my opinion, kind of going to be the relief valve so that Miami can continue to grow healthily into the future.
That is really cool, and thanks for your insight. Yeah, I've seen a lot. I've been reading tons of articles about Homestead, growing as a residential, maybe refuge, right? A pressure valve, right?
Yeah,
Because, not everyone can live and not everyone wants to live in, the center of it all. They
yeah.
want to live with a family and have a backyard and then also have that affordable. And I know that the government, as well as developers, builders in Homestead, are trying to make that happen with people like Lennar and other companies are going down there to make it more available for residential development. Would you say that development of industrial tracks residential development?
I think to a degree, it depends. Like, for example, there's different, industrial is interesting in that, I would say residential caters towards people that are, living there, right? And it could be a different sort of,
Yeah,
income levels. But like an industrial building can service everything from, a giant commercial empanada manufacturer to a specialized satellite component builder to just a dead storage user. So like, there's so many different types of businesses. I think businesses that are very Miami International Airport focused or Port Miami focused, they're going to still have to gravitate and be closer to those ports. But industrial uses that follow population growth, and let's talk about impact glass installers, roofers, carpenters. Those even automotive, think of mechanics and car storage, like those types of uses that follow population. Those are going to be the really important ones that you're going to see, I think, pop up more and more down south. Because why? Not only are there customers down there, but the owners of those companies are down there, right? They're going to be like, hey, I live here in Homestead.
yeah,
Why would I drive all the way to Medley in order to, have my carpentry shop? Like, I'll just, if someone presents a good option down the street, I'll definitely, jump on that. So I think there's still going to be some tenants that are very travel time focused to the ports, that need to be close to the cargo entrance of the airport, that need to be close to Port Miami and Port Everglades. But I think there's going to be a sector of tenants that say, hey, no, I just need to be close to the population that's using my services. I'm fine with South Dade. I'm fine with Homestead, and it actually works better for me.
interesting. So it seems like the industrial companies with maybe residential applications are going to the residential areas, but it's not necessarily the case for all of them, but just, yeah, some of them.
Correct. Some of them, like for example, I'll use an extreme example, but like flower companies,
Yeah,
if they're more than 15 minutes sometimes from the airport, it's a problem because every moment that a flower that's coming from South America loses temperature, it reduces shelf life in a supermarket in Boston, Massachusetts. So they'll come into Miami, they'll move them to warehouses, they'll drop the temperature again, and then they'll ship them. They're
yeah.
just trying to keep them cold for as long as possible. If you're shipping them all the way down to Homestead, that's like where some tenants will be like, hey, we can't do that because that'll have a direct impact on the shelf life of the product we're selling. That's an extreme example because flower guys are super sensitive.
Okay.
But there's going to be some tenants like that are saying, hey, I need to be as close to X region. And for that reason, I can't have an extra, 45 minute to an hour drive.
I see, yeah. And I remember you were speaking a couple weeks ago about how important the Miami port is really to trade across the U.S., and that is fascinating. Do you have any factoids that you can bring up from that? Because I was so impressed to hear about really the status that Miami has right now.
Yeah, I would say, and man, if I misquote the stats,
No
don't hold it
worries.
against
We'll
me.
fact
But
check it.
yeah, exactly. Fact check me. But I would say that relative to the size of our population, what has always impressed me is like our ports do a lot of business.
Yeah.
And Miami International is like number one. I do remember this one, number one in international freight. And then like 80% of all imports and exports, roughly, going to and from Latin America that fly by air go through MIA. So like you have not only is Miami growing as a city, like as a population, which is, like we mentioned, super important for industrial growth, but you have, the trade with Latin America that's extremely important. And then our ports, both Port Everglades and Port Miami, we're perennially like top 15 in the United States. So you're
Mhm.
talking about like two really strong ports that again, a lot of the product that's coming in to the east side of the United States is going through both our ports because we're so close to deep water. So like everywhere you look, the way I described it is I have a vacant space and we have a ton of demand from X type of user from X country. When that subsides, it seems like I almost get back up. Like I start noticing trends from another country, another type of use. So there always seems to be like a type of tenant for industrial Miami that is doing well and pushing demand when you lose one business or there's been a political change in a certain country. So it's always kind of finding where the trend is there, but there has never been a shortage of like replacement businesses that are looking for Miami industrial warehouses.
Like, what would you say, right now are some of the bigger challenges that industrial builders and brokers are looking at today?
I'd say that like some of the biggest challenges is because our rental rates have moved up so much. Obviously, the price that people are paying for these warehouses gone up, and it's just equated to not only like more rental rate growth, but operating expenses are huge, right? Insurance have gone up, and then taxes have gone up.
Hmm.
So all of a sudden, yes, you show a tenant a $20 net renewal rate. Number one, it's probably double what they were paying before. But not only is the rate a lot higher, but the operating expenses, like the stuff that the landlord can control, which is the insurance and the taxes, have also gone up a lot. So, a lot of it, the difficulty that we're having when we represent the landlord is how do we try to make sure that we're signing deals and finding tenants, but that the tenants that are signing these deals, they're going to be set up for success in the sense that you don't want to charge a huge rate that this tenant is not going to be able to support into month 3 or 4 of the lease, and then part of my that's my landlord hat, my tenant hat. It's also very difficult because some of these tenants really have to assess like, okay, like fundamentally I might have to change some of like the margins in my business because my rent's getting so expensive. So the rent growth has been good for investors and owners here, but it also has been difficult to navigate because a lot of these companies, some of them can't afford it or their margins are tighter. Some can, but most can. But it's just you have to navigate the fact that you can't be blind to the fact that like the rental rates have, in some cases, almost doubled in a very short period of time.
I see. Cool. And then, so back to the people who are looking to invest in Miami industrial, would you say it's more of a institutional side, or it's more owner users, or is it small time landlords who are interested? What would you say?
This sounds crazy to say, but it's like everyone. It's
Everyone. Okay.
like if anyone, I think everyone has caught up to the fact that like Miami is doing extremely well, and we've had so much rent growth. But like, if you're selling an institutional size, say something over 20 million, you're gonna have 100 interested parties that are institutional investment groups. But now there's also private investors that are saying, "Hey, listen, I want to get in on this too. We're private, we're a family fund. We're trying to buy it ourselves." So you're seeing that, and then users also, imagine if your rent went from $10 to $20, and you are a company that has a couple 100 million. You say, "Why don't I just buy my facility and I don't have to worry about it?" So there's just demand. The problem is there's not as much sellers. Like people have realized it's probably going to keep going up, so it's tough to get people to sell unless there's like some sort of need or the timing is right for like their particular group. But it's just we're just transacting less, but the demand is still there, if not even higher.
I see. Yeah, there's a lot of growth there. So I kind of wanted to ask you, throughout your career, have you had any like really challenging deals or deals that you look back on and think, wow, that really taught me something, or wow, this client really made me work for my money. Love
Yeah,
to
yeah.
hear about your experience.
Yeah, so I would say that probably like the most formative deals that I've done have been where I push myself out of my comfort zone
Okay.
and specifically let me put it this way, out of the comfort zone of like my father as well, like our firm, right? Because with any mentor, having a mentor that you can always check the advice you're giving your clients like up against is always great. But there's been situations like, and my father jokes around with it all the time, but I'll ask him, hey, have you ever seen this before? And like at least once a day, nope. Like it's
Oh,
such a unique business that like you see things new all the time. So it's almost like, a good broker, he says it too. A good broker is a different is changes their skill set every 5 years. Like he's not the same broker he was 5 years ago. He wasn't the same. So you have to be continuously adapting. And I think some of my favorite deals have been where, like, again, my father and I keep referencing him because I work with him direct, but we're a
yeah.
team of 8. But when me and my team, or like specifically me and my father, have said, hey, this is something that is going to push us out of our comfort zone. We're going to challenge ourselves. We're going to figure it out, and we're going to go try to get this done. And we've done that a few times, very, and fortunately have been successful. But kind of that's been probably the most formative for me. And there's been a few deals where we sold like a $23 million warehouse in Hialeah. That was kind of a bit of a difficult process. There was another time that we had a super complicated deal that involved. It was during COVID. It was a 208,000 square foot lease. I'm not going to mention the companies, but it was like we had to simultaneously negotiate a termination with a huge national, well-known brand, the signing of a lease with a less-known national brand, and then also like timing it all with like a seamless transition. And those deals where it's like you're completely in over your head, and you just take a moment and you say, okay, let me like I can figure this out. That's been where you come out on the other side and you're like, wow, like that's where I really learned. But it always comes down to pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, but doing so in a way where you're like, I know I'm going to do the right job, and I'm going to get the right advice to my client. But that's probably been the most formative for me.
That sounds like a really interesting deal that I'm sure you had to learn a lot from.
Yeah, and also like I would tell other brokers like in that deal I got involved from obviously the showing, the tours, the construction design, and the lease. Like not that I was giving our client any legal advice, but I was present on every single leasing call because your clients are landlords or tenants. Like the lease is what ends up holding. Business terms are one thing, but you have to, especially on those size transactions, you have to really understand the lease. And there's a saying in our business that SIR is RTFL. It says nicely, read the freaking lease. That is so important. And understanding leases, at least at an 85% level, is important because there's little things that you say, oh, let the attorneys worry about. But you'd be surprised how many people hire like attorneys that may not be so well versed in real estate, and then the advice that comes from their broker, hey, attorney, make sure you check these clauses, make sure this is fine because of this concern. That will help your client on real world issues that may come up in the future. So, reading the lease and understanding the deal from not only making a good impression and showing the space well, but going through the process of sitting on those lease calls or contract review calls, super important in my opinion.
So we heard it here. Read the freaking lease.
Yeah,
So make sure you do that. Any brokers listening to this, read the lease.
RTFL.
Um, that is great advice. I would like to know. I'm sure you've come across young brokers who say, I want to get into the industrial sector. What are some things that you would recommend somebody who maybe just started or is thinking about it?
I my number one advice is actually two pieces. Is number one, find a great mentor. Like I mentioned, I was fortunate that I get along very well with my family, and that was my mentorship. But so many very very successful people in my industry that are my age and younger. I saw them go into a place, and we've talked about this, Arlie, is where the people that are your mentors are invested in your success, whether it be financially, but perhaps even better or more important, emotionally, and just like they want to see you successful, and they're going to invest their time specifically into you, not just hey we're going to give you a great commission split, and if you close a deal, you keep 90-10. I don't. I don't think there's a ton of value, at least early on. I would rather tell, if I told a young cousin that was getting into the business or a young friend, hey, do not focus on the commissions, but focus on getting the time of a senior person in industrial or in office or in retail for the first few years of your career. That's going to be the most formative. And then number two, and this is probably my another very important advice, if you're talking to a firm about joining them, having an environment where you can jump in and have a lot of volume, even if it's not lucrative. Say they say, hey, we have this super annoying project. It has 100 tenants. They're 200 square feet. You're going to make $50 a commission on each deal, and they're all going to take you hours and hours and hours. I would tell you take that because you're going to get a master's degree in negotiating. Like I was telling one of the guys that most recently joined us, Ricky, he has a property that has 200 tenants and it's very labor intensive. But what he has learned in the first 8 months in the business, you cannot, like, there's brokers that I know that have been in the business 20 years and they have not learned as much because of the fact that every deal is hard, even if it's a small deal or a large deal, and they have dynamics and you're moving parts and everything. So I would tell you, if possible, I would prioritize over a commission split, over anything that with your broker. I would prioritize the time of your mentor, making sure they have enough time to spend with you and they're going to be invested in your success, from that perspective. And number two, high reps. Wherever you land, try to see, even if it's annoying and it's a tough project, you're not going to make a killing. Try to land in a spot where you can get a project where somebody's like, hey, I can't take this anymore. Here, take this over for me. High volume and high reps, that is going to just fast track your career and get you to the point where you're an expert a lot quicker than somebody else that maybe is only chasing big deals or only cold calling.
Yeah, that's really interesting as well and useful because sometimes the small deals actually require more work. It's more like
100%.
the large deals, with the large investors. If they have a lot of capital, they don't necessarily always want to fuss over the small details.
Yeah, and those people are experienced. They have real estate attorneys. They've done dozens of transactions.
True,
And
true.
then sometimes the smaller shops, like the carpenter you're dealing with, like this is his bread and butter. He signs this contract once every 5 years and he lives
Yeah.
and dies by it. So like that's really emotional for him and you want to make sure you do a good job by him and also by your client. So I would tell you, yeah, take the small deals because you'll learn a lot from them and if you can find like a high volume project, again, it's easier said than done. But if you can find a team that can offer you a high volume project, jump on that because that's the best education you'll get.
Awesome. So when you're working with a client, what kind of strategies would you tell them? Like if they were a seller of industrial, what would you tell them to try to maximize the value or sell at the best price?
Yeah, so the most important thing for us is trying to understand all the curveballs that may be coming when we're giving advice. So, like, if a person comes to me and they're a seller, the first thing I tell them is like, listen, what are the real issues with the property? Like, do we have any environmental issues? Are there any provisions in the most recently signed lease that give you an obligation? Does the roof have life on it? Is there? Give me the concerns because like we said, if I can try to be most upfront with a buyer early on and show them all the issues and tell them, listen, you're going to have to do your own research, of course. But generally speaking, when you make us an offer, budget for a new roof, budget for a new paving project, the tenant is asking for it. You give people all that. And then when you let them know, then the offer that comes to you is not going to have the hidden contingency of, oh, well, we found out that the roof needed XYZ. So, like, I try to get as much information from them, and then we can collectively decide, hey, what's going to be important, what's going to drive value or not. And then the other piece of advice that I give is when I'm representing a seller is I trust in the competitive bid environment type process. Like people are like, oh, I got this unsolicited offer and it might be really good. You would be surprised, especially in today's world with how many investors there are looking for South Florida. A competitively bid process is called price discovery for a reason. Like people get going in that and you will see how much more value you can extract from that, even though again it's more labor intensive. It's a process you have to run very well and you have to be careful about. But what we like to do and the way we drive the value the most is try to be as totally upfront as possible to any buyers of, hey, these are the issues. So you budget, whenever you make an offer, you budget for this because we don't want to hear about during due diligence that, oh, we discovered this. No, make the offer contingent on what we at least know. If we get to due diligence and something unexpected comes up, we always will deal with it. But you try to get as much information out there, once an NDA is signed. And then I like and I really firmly believe in the competitively bid process and the marketing process because I think you will generate the highest price.
And if you're going to do any site visits with your clients, are there any things that you particularly look out for?
Yes, I'm a huge believer in like literally do not show up empty handed. Like, I, print everything out, show up with the brochure, or even if the tenant rep says, hey, I have the brochure printed in the package. Okay, that's fine. I'm going to bring my own. It's going to be printed on a bigger piece of paper. I'm going to have the plan. Maybe like show up with paper because it's so much easier to give an on the go explanation of something with something in your hand. If I don't have it, I bring my iPad because I can pull up something. So I would say literally just never show up empty handed to a meeting because you'd be so surprised how many super important meetings I show up with and no one printed out the proposal. No one has a layout of the floor plan. No one has an idea of the terms. if anything, you hold on to it and you don't have it there, or during the meeting you can check it yourself. But I would say always come prepared either in the form of your iPad and you have the documents teed up, or print it out and have it ready, because you never know. Like the other day, we brought these big presentation boards, and it was a bit old school. We had the company's logo on it. The decision maker of the company is like, "Hey, do you mind if I take these boards?" I was like, "Man, this guy's gonna take these boards, put them in his conference room. Of course, he's gonna think about our project every single day because he's gonna walk by these annoying 4x4 boards." So like, you'd be surprised how much still like paper or take home stuff, or at least having an iPad there is important. And I'm a firm believer in that. Don't show up empty handed ever.
So don't show up empty-handed, and I think what you're explaining kind of illustrates the importance of staying top of mind, which is super important for brokers.
100%.
You want to be the first one that they think of when they are trying to sell, lease, or buy industrial real estate. And it's not easy, but things like that are great. When you have a presence in their own office, as they chose,
Exactly.
it helps a lot.
Hmm.
And they're going to come to you most likely in the event that they want to sell or whatever that was that they're working on right then. They're gonna think of you guys first, and they'll give you the call, which means a lot.
100%.
So that's great. I kind of wanted to talk about. So now it's 2024, the end of 2024. We had an election, so that's over.
Hmm.
So now we're in a new phase in this country, and we're seeing some changes that some of them started since the election, and some of them have been going on for a couple of years. Like nearshoring and bringing industry back from other countries like China. Do you think that that's affected industrial real estate here?
I'll tell you, so far, I think people have been calling it the Trump bump, right? Like, there's been some. I think there was a lot of indecision before the elections because, regardless of who was going to get elected, people just didn't know what the landscape was going to look like. I've seen post-election a little bit more decision making happening. I think people are, for positive, for negative, they're focused on, okay, this is what the landscape's going to look like. We're going to make some decisions. On some cases there's a lot of positive sentiment, and so like I think from the investment world you're going to see some of that. In some cases I deal with some companies that are a little concerned of the tariffs, which was interesting, and I had
Yeah.
some companies that said, oh well, listen, we might have to rediscuss our terms because I don't know how the landscape's going to look from like the perspective of imports. But generally speaking, I would say that post election it's been positive, and like I feel, and we were talking about this before we started recording, it's like there seems to be a lot of decision making that we're trying to happen this year, and it seems generally speaking people are making those decisions, or trying to get them done before the holidays kick in. So I'd say that generally I think 2025 is going to start pretty strongly in the form of like tenant demand and market sentiment. So hopefully it's not recency bias, but yeah, I think that we should have a pretty strong year next year in regards to the industrial market, both on purchase demand, buyer demand, and then also leasing.
That's great to hear. And I don't know if you heard, but the other team was considering, maybe this is hyperbole, but getting rid of 1031s. Did you hear about that?
Yeah, that
That
was
was
one of those things that I was just like, man, that's, when you take a step back, you're just like, that is such a problem, especially like so much of our, 1031s is such a great thing for our business. So thankfully that doesn't look like it got any traction because, again, I'm dealing with a few 1031 buyers and
are
some
you
groups that have those funds,
okay?
and it's a great mechanism by which to keep people invested in real estate and reinvesting their funds in the United States. So like I think that again the 1031 program I think is phenomenal. It's a great tool to use, and I'm happy it's here to stay for sure. Hopefully.
Absolutely. And for those of you guys who are watching and are not familiar, simply put, a 1031 exchange is a strategy to defer your capital gains tax, which is used in real estate if you purchase a like kind property in a very short period of time. Feel free to Google it for some more details on that, but it's used very often in real estate, and it's one of the benefits of actually transacting and owning real estate. Whereas if you own equities like stocks, or other things that are not real estate, you're gonna have to pay the capital gains, which takes a big chunk out of your earnings. So that's another reason why. And apparently, they're even talking right now about getting rid of capital gains tax on crypto, which has also gone through a boom the past couple of weeks. Everyone's screaming out, how amazing crypto's gone. It's gonna hit like 100K per specifically Bitcoin
Yeah,
does,
yeah, yeah.
which is very interesting as well. I think it's just part of the general positive sentiment.
Yeah,
People are
100%.
happy about markets, and if they're gonna get rid of capital gains on crypto, then I'm sure there are gonna be people entering that market as well. And just like they have in real estate, it's a great benefit to have. So yeah, I wanted to ask you. So yeah, like on a more personal note, I saw that you are a big fisherman, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
So where do you like to go fishing?
Man, I love fishing here. I've always loved fishing. It was one of those things that my family was not into fishing, but I just, came out of the womb and I was obsessed, right? And so I love fishing because it's also very similar to real estate in the sense like there's highs and lows, and you have to learn that, one day may be terrible and the next day may be phenomenal. And, there's only so much that you can control. Like, we do everything we can when we go out fishing to be as prepared as possible for every scenario. And there's times that we go out there and it's like we wrote up a playbook and we caught this fish, then we moved to this spot, and we caught that one, and it worked out. And there's days where you can work your tail off and you're not catching anything. And I think that's what I also like. And then the sky's the limit, right? Like I mentioned that about like commission fee business, like. You can go out there and you go home hungry, and my wife asked me, "She's like, what'd you catch?" And I was like, "Nothing, like
Yeah.
absolutely nothing." And there's days that we come back and we're like giving away all this fish that we caught. So I think it's just for my personality. I love that, and it's taught me to be. There's a saying. It's like all men are equal before fish, and I like that because it's like the fish don't care if you're like on a $10 million boat, or if you're on a dinghy, and I think there's a humbling component about that, which I love. And then it's also just it's so beautiful to be out on the water. So love fishing. I try to do it as much as possible. I used to fish at least once a week, and then now with the baby, I got a little 10-month-old at home. It's not as common, but my wife still lets me get out there as much as I can, and yeah, it's another beauty of Miami that we're here. We're doing a podcast. I'm gonna have some meetings in Hialeah later at some warehouses, and if I wanted to, I could go fishing this afternoon because of the proximity of the Gulf Stream and all the amazing natural beauty down here in South Florida. So it's I could do a whole 2-hour podcast just on fishing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but it's definitely like my passion outside of real estate.
That is so cool. And speaking of fishing, I think that commercial real estate is a lot like the Hemingway book, The Old Man and the Sea.
Yeah.
The man goes fishing for days and days and he doesn't catch anything. I actually forget how that story ends. I wonder if he ever caught anything in the end. I sure hope so, but,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
you know,
listen. I totally agree with you. There's so many parallels between fishing and just the mentality of a fisherman and real estate. The highs and lows. I also am a huge believer in hot streaks and cold streaks. Like genuinely, like I'm one of those people that, I haven't closed a big or an important deal in 3 or 4 months. I don't have the mindset of, oh my God, like what's going to happen. I'm just like, man, I'm excited for what's going to happen because something's going to land in the next like month or two. And when I get really, really hot and I say, oh man, every deal that I've been putting LOIs out for, they've been agreeing and they've been closing. I also mentally prepare that, like, okay, I'm probably going to go cold, a little bit of cold streak for a little bit because that things just come in waves, it seems to me, just in like all facets of life. Fishing is the same way. Like if I have a few days where I can't do anything wrong, I'm winning tournaments, I'm doing all this stuff. In my head, I'm like, okay, just be ready. When you have 5 days in a row where you don't catch anything, that's par for the course. So I think that mentality of just knowing, like, hey, there's going to be times where you're super hot, and there's going to be times where you're super cold, and there's only so much you can control, and what's controlling the preparation, right? The preparation and the effort. I think that's where, again, it's been a great. It's like any good passion, like people who are obsessed with golf or working out, like those passions teach you about life, and then life teaches you about those sports too.
mm,
So it's like vice versa. Like art imitates life, or whatever the quote is. But yeah, you just have to remember to keep an even keel and just like don't get too high, don't get too low. Keep with it, and over the long term, you're gonna have consistent success.
yeah, I think it's really important. I agree that basically, just keep doing the same things consistently, and you might not see the results from it at one point, but that doesn't mean that you're not doing the right thing. You just haven't seen the reward yet. It takes time. Commercial notoriously takes longer than some other fields in sales, and
100%.
that's just par for the course. And I think that brokers just need to keep calm and carry on, right?
100%. And I'll tell you, it's a lot easier for me. And again, I'm not like a 40-year veteran in this business, but I've been in the business now like 12 years. When I see like people that are just getting into it, Harley, and they're like frustrated, and I see everything they're doing, and I'm like, it's so easy for me to see sometimes like, hey, you're gonna be successful. You don't even know it yet. Like you're gonna kill it. You're going to do extremely well because I already see that you're putting in the work early on. And once you get into that groove, you're going to start noticing that people are going to be calling you more. Your pipeline's going to show up, and it's going to be that you look up and you're not even chasing new business; it's coming to you. And with certain personalities and certain people that work that hard, you see it. I see it in you 100% candidly, like all the work that you've done. And it's obvious for me, but obviously when I was younger, sometimes it's not so obvious when you're in it yourself, right? You're
Yeah.
just like, man, I've been putting in the work and I've been doing all this, and it's been frustrating. I've had mixed results, but sometimes when somebody that's been in the business, and I think about the old man in the sea, he probably looks at younger fishermen and he's like, dude, you're doing everything right. It's gonna come, but stay the course, stay the course because it's just a matter of you build it slowly, and then once you build momentum, you're gonna look up one day and you're gonna be like, man, like I almost have to hire someone to help me with all the business that we're taking on, right? So I would tell that to any young brokers that are watching. Is like, as long as you're doing the things the right way and you've put yourself in a position to succeed and you keep working hard, the success will be there. And then don't get too high on the highs. If you close a big deal, don't go buy a Porsche. Just stay consistent. Realize that you can get hot, you can get cold, but you just have to keep doing everything. You have to have a short-term memory,
Mm.
effectively. If you get a huge deal the day before, next morning, show up at 9 a.m., 8 a.m., get to work. If you lose a huge deal, same thing, short term memory, get back to work. I think that's super important with at least the people that I've seen have been super successful.
Someone with a little more experience come and chat with these newer brokers and just say, like, listen, if you're doing this, this, and this, you're going to be fine. Because in the beginning, it's tough. It's
Yeah.
tough, and it builds on itself. And as well, like what you were talking about before, about getting a big deal and not taking it, don't get it, let it get to your head, right? Keep working as if you didn't. Keep the consistency up, and then also, a great way to sell yourself as a broker is to remind people of the deals you've worked on, right? Because transaction history builds on itself. So people want to hear about how you've serviced other people well, because then they think, oh well, okay, I could be put in the client position from this guy, and I think he'll do a pretty good job, or
That's
she.
great advice. Yeah, listen, don't be afraid to name drop. Don't be annoying about it. But like, I'm in. If I have a meeting and I let people know and they don't know who like I'll be like, listen, I've worked with XYZ. I've done these deals. Like, this is something I can do all day long, and no pressure. Like, again, different people have different styles, but I let people know what I do, and then I'll exactly tell them, hey, I've worked on specifically transactions like this, which
Yeah.
have been success stories. These couple of ones, and just don't be afraid to tell people that. Obviously, don't do it in a braggadocious way, but telling people what you've been up to and what you've done is important.
On the same note, if you're a broker without that much experience to lean on to try to sell yourself, there are other things you can use. You can emphasize the great team that you work with. And also, you could just speak about how hungry you are, because that makes a big difference. Because some people who have been in the industry, they get a little choosy on the deals they work on, and
That's great advice. Yeah.
you don't have that leverage, right? So you tell your client or your prospective client, listen, I might be new, but I am going to work your deal like you've never seen before, and I'm going to give you the best service possible. And that speaks volumes to a business owner.
Yeah, and listen, I'll tell you, I mentioned it before, pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. Let me tell you, something an advice we gave to an intern that was working for us this summer is there is not anything that you cannot learn anymore via Google or ChatGPT. Like so the I don't know that excuse is gone now because like you can have AI explain to you anything. So like do not be overwhelmed by a problem or challenge. Just get smart on it. Just go out there and like you'd be surprised how many times I see the senior brokers in our office. And again, there's a few brokers there have been there much longer than I have, and so much of their process is self-education. They'll be like, I don't really know if you could break out an individual's earnings and apply that as part of a partnership to a new 1031 exchange. And their process is not like, oh well, I guess we don't know. It's let's go find out the answer because that's super interesting. Like you can go find out the answer, so don't ever be overwhelmed by like a challenge or something that's pushing you out of the comfort zone. Of course, try to partner with people that are experts, but you can pretty much find out anything you need to know nowadays via Google or ChatGPT. So I would say yeah, just like Harley mentioned, like show your eagerness to work and educate yourself, because you could probably learn just as much with a good hour of focus than people that have tons of years of experience. So definitely do that. Spend the time to Google, and don't just say, "Oh, I don't know." Just figure it out, and then try to educate yourself as much as possible.
Yeah, and on that note, I mean, it's great to have a broker at your side to refer your questions to, or other agents who you might be able to ask here and there some questions about. But, learning for yourself is important. And we have the internet, we have AI, and that's really been a game changer. I know that I use ChatGPT probably every day now.
Yeah.
Not all day, but a couple questions I have, and it gives me a decent answer. And are you using ChatGPT or other
Yeah, we
AI
use it all the time,
tools?
and exactly that countered with the good mentorship is huge, right? You'll ask your mentor a question, and you get an answer, and then I'll say this: I'll use the Google and ChatGPT before I go ask the question, because then my
Okay.
question's a little smarter, and then you can lean on. There's no substitute for experience. You can lean on the experience of your senior broker, your senior team members to kind of fill in the gaps and kind of any nuances that perhaps the artificial intelligence can't pick up on. But yeah, using it as a tool is huge, and yeah, we probably use it. I don't know if I use it every day, but pretty close, and I should use it every day, because there's stuff that takes my time that I should probably just assign to to
Yeah.
ChatGPT. You know.
That's awesome. So I think we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you so much, Sebastian. This is Sebastian Juncadella. How can we reach you?
So, feel free to reach out to me. However, my our company's Fairchild Partners, so feel free to visit fairchildpartners.com. You'll see my cell phone listed in my email. If anyone has any questions, reach out to Harley. I'm happy to connect. Harley and I get coffee, and I know that. We like to make ourselves accessible to everyone, whether you're senior or junior or just starting in the business. I think that that's super important as part of the real estate community to be connected, and to, when you have the ability to give advice, give it like I'm giving today. But also when I go and seek advice, I always appreciated people making themselves available to me. So yeah, look us up. My contact is I guess I'll list it with you on the website or
Yeah.
something. But
Yeah.
uh, but yeah, feel free to reach out, and I always appreciate people doing so.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. This is Harley Sentner talking about commercial real estate down in the 305. So we'll be back soon with some more content. I hope you enjoyed. Please subscribe, like, and send to a friend.